In 1995, four buddies went mountain hiking. For whatever reason, one of them, Paul, blows into a flute-like instrument and is abruptly drawn into a fissure into which he deliberately falls. His buddies discover him in a catatonic state, staring at something in front of him. His buddies notice that it is a strange skeleton. The buddies discover an empty house as a winter approaches and try to blame each other for Paul's predicament. Later, as two of the pals go exploring, Ruthie goes outdoors for some fresh air and instead encounters a bizarre monster that rushes towards her. She returns to the house and locks the door. But it's her companions, not the strange creature, who are perplexed as to why she slammed the door in their faces. Later that night, while everyone is asleep, Paul chooses to wake up and say something in Ruthie's ear that sounds like clicking sounds. Paul is absent the next morning, and his buddies discover him sitting near a precipice. They are tired of taking care of him and hurl abuses at him. Ruthie is furious and goes on a stabbing frenzy, throwing her pals down the cliff. Then Paul looks at her while continuing playing the instrument, and Ruthie realizes she despises the music and would rather plunge off the cliff herself than hear it. The year has changed to 2018. James is the proprietor of a security shop. His wife and child were died in an accident, and he is still traumatized as a result of it. When he goes home, he discovers Amanda, the neighbor's daughter, seated on the bench outside his house. They have an unusual talk in which she makes a statement about things not being very real and James makes a strange look reminding her that certain things are real. Amanda is adamant about her outlandish ideas, and she clearly behaves like someone who has been brainwashed by a cult. The next day, Amanda's mother, Nora, phones him to inform him about a strange event at her house. He goes out there because he was a former cop, but why does Nora contact him? Spoiler alert. They were having an affair, and Nora now relies on him for everything. In this example, Amanda had scrawled something on the walls and blamed it on the empty man. The empty man forced me to do it. She has vanished, and James offers to find her, mostly because a police inquiry reveals that the blood used to scrawl the message was not human blood, and James is curious as to which animal she murdered. He investigates Amanda's social network and pursues Amanda's friend Devara, who is almost ready to confess everything after being offered a cigarette. She tells him about the night she spent with Amanda and their other friends, all of whom believed that roaming on a bridge was a fun thing to do. Amanda is in her own universe when she appears out of nowhere and informs them they may summon the empty man. According to mythology, or most likely Amanda, you will hear the empty man on the first day after summoning him, see him on the second day, and come to visit you on the third day. Ooh, what a wonderful game it would be to summon someone to stalk you. Teenagers are no longer satisfied with likes and followers on social media. Now they want a weird entity to follow them around? It doesn't take much persuasion to persuade everyone to blow on a dirty glass bottle resting on the side of the road, since an empty bottle signifies the empty man is yearning to be reached. Devara isn't interested and thinks it's immature, but peer pressure forces her to blow on the dirty bottle. The pals are startled and flee when they see or feel something on the opposite side of the bridge. Why would you contact the empty man if you wanted to avoid him? The next day, Devara claims to have seen Amanda at the mall speaking in the ear of another buddy. Another whispered click. Devara claims it was the last time she saw Amanda before becoming alarmed when she saw an odd figure she believes to be the empty man. Later that night, after droning on and on about the empty man with James, Devara goes to the spa to unwind. But just when she believed she was getting away from him, the empty man enters and murders her with a pair of scissors for some reason, then makes it appear as though she drew herself up against the wall and stabbed herself. James tries to locate his other buddies, but the houses are all empty. Unfortunately, few of them have parents or pets, and all of the doors are open. He walks to the bridge, assuming that's where they were hiding, when he discovers an empty glass bottle. James, too, wishes to call the empty man. He observes something strange and is taken to the steps leading beneath the bridge. There, he discovers the remainder of Amanda's pals hanged, as well as the identical note accusing the empty man of the crime. James arrives at the police station and learns of Devara's suicide. He can't believe his pals committed suicide, and he still hasn't found Amanda. He realizes that the police are incapable of solving the mystery, as they are in virtually every horror film, and decides to become a detective himself. He learns about the Pontifex Institute and decides to join it. He begins to show everyone Amanda's photo, but no one has seen her. Garrett, an unscrupulous character, chuckles at him. He then attends a lecture by Arthur, who says something mysterious about the abyss and people yearning to investigate it, as well as other philosophical ramblings. When he mentions the empty man, James perks up his ear and realizes he's on the right track. He decides to undertake further stalking and ends himself in a cabin in the woods where he discovers files on Amanda, Paul, and himself. When he opens the file, he discovers nothing. When he exits, he notices other cult members having a bonfire and continues to observe them. The fire goes out, and James realizes they found him. In the following split second, he is pursued by the entire bunch and narrowly escapes. He goes to the police station, but he isn't taken seriously since, well, it's still a horror film. He tells Amanda's mother about the institute, and they receive another call with the clicking whispering. James brings her to a motel where they discuss their affair. He was apparently with her the night James's wife and child were murdered in a car accident. The phrase, "Where were you?" is repeated several times. James is presently at a loss for words. He could have just gone away, but he prefers to stay and go utterly insane. He tracks down the shady cult member who tells him about a man in the hospital who is essentially being used as a vessel for the empty man to convey messages. I'm not sure what it is or how the cult benefits from the empty man. All this talk about the empty man giving people what they desire, but he's just killed the individuals who summoned him thus far. When James arrives at the hospital, he discovers that Paul has been in a coma and in the ICU for years, and none of the physicians appear to care about his identity or anything else. James discovers the members of the cult worshipping him, but he also discovers Amanda shaving and grooming Paul. She tells him about Paul's inability to remain stable as a result of the empty man's use of him as a vessel. They require a replacement, and plot twist time, it is James. Apparently, James did not exist before the cult brought him back to life. The empty man tried to exploit him before but was unable to do so since James was not guilt-ridden, so memories of his late wife and son were implanted in him. James, who can't believe he's a nothing, phones Nora, who has no idea who he is. James does not go to the cops. One phone call is all it takes to confirm his reservations. Amanda appears to have dispelled the illusion of James in everyone's minds, for how could her mother and the police have known about James's past? James then experiences a hallucination and concludes he doesn't mind the empty man using him as a puppet. When he awakens, the first thing he does is murder Paul. Then he gets to enjoy being adored by everyone in the hospital. Apparently, there are nurses that believe in the empty man as well. The film had some interesting moments, but James playing the empty man seemed a little far-fetched. All he had to do was admit to being guilty. Did he really need to be taken all over town simply to be informed his genuine identity at the end?